Hello, I'm Howie Sheriff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga's internet TV talk show about accessible yoga. We boldly go where very few shows have gone before in trying to bring the concepts of accessible yoga to our viewers and listeners, plus also folks that have seen this afterwards on recorded video such as YouTube or other channels. We're fortunate to bring guests in live in the studio, such as today with Cheryl Fenner Brown, or also via Skype, where we have the opportunity to learn more about them and their mission, as well as for you to check in with us and to engage them. That's engage them. You can call in at 919. Cheryl's mic is in the way. 518-9773, or on Skype at Computers 2K Voice. You can also log in on the chat box where you are logged in now. We'll be bringing Cheryl on shortly, who will be discussing her program and training in yoga for cancer survivors, as well as some of the interesting aspects of the different limbs of yoga that she utilizes, such as sound, chakras, and other things that she has in her pearls of wisdom. You Call This Yoga is a 501c3 nonprofit who brings yoga to the physically challenged and underserved. This year, and maybe beyond, our focus has been underserved youth, physically challenged, and military veterans. We have programs that have been going on for years, as well as some that are starting this month and next month. So do visit the youcallthisyoga.org website, and under what we do, you might find our calendar, of which also is a very fun event this coming Saturday at Bliss Body Yoga, their 4th anniversary. We'll learn more about that later on the show. I asked my guests not to ramble for more than 3 minutes, and the clock here is almost at 3 minutes. So with that, we're going to bring Cheryl Fenner Brown. Cheryl is a yoga teacher and delightful woman that I've met years ago who has volunteered her services and wisdom in Yoga Nidra, as well as restorative yoga processes at our yoga fests and at our partner at Bliss Body Yoga. I'll bring Cheryl on now, who can tell us about some of her journey and how she became interested in yoga and anything that has inspired her along her accessible yoga path.
Good morning, Howie.
Hello.
Pleasure to be here. Where to start? It's long ago. I started practicing yoga probably in 2001, so a long time ago. I was a self-proclaimed workout junkie, and I was working at a pretty high-stress software job at that time, and would go to the gym with a book and music, and there was usually a television on the wall, and I was seemingly working out to improve my health, but I was also distracting myself thoroughly in the process, and took a class at a gym. And the first class I took, I have to admit, I absolutely hated it because the teacher was calling out pose names and not explaining how to do anything, and I was completely lost. So a few years later, I tried again at another gym and actually took a class and loved it. And at that time, was asked to, stand in mountain pose and just feel my feet or feel myself breathing, and was amazed that I could, instead of trying to multitask, try to do just one thing or one or two things, and it felt amazing. And I thought, this is really where it's at. So at that time, I was a instructional designer for a software company and really loved teaching adults. But when that started to fall away, that kind of job in Northern California, decided that I still wanted to teach adults and decided to get trained to be a yoga instructor.
Hmm. And what were the opportunities to actually learn to become a yoga instructor at that time?
In Oakland, where I was living, there was a really wonderful school called Piedmont Yoga Studio and School, and they offered a year and a half advanced studies program. And honestly, most of the people that were taking that program weren't taking it to become teachers. It was just to develop their own practice and deepen their own understanding of yoga philosophy. So I enrolled in that and I studied with some wonderful teachers there. Richard Rosen, who is known for his work in pranayama, and Rodney Yee, and a woman named Claire Finn, and a woman named Maritza, who's an Anyasara teacher. So it was mainly a hatha based program, with a little bit of Anyasara thrown in. And just I was just amazed at all of the different facets of the yoga practice, the anatomy and the philosophy, and became really enamored with all of the connections between the body and the mind and the emotions, and how yoga can make you feel certain ways. You know, forward bends can make you feel relaxed and surrendered, and how back bends can make you feel joyous. And that really piqued my interest even beyond taking that training.
Hmm. Did you have any physical challenges from being a software designer?
Oh, yes. I pretty much when I started doing the yoga training, because there was so much more physical activity involved, I started to see a chiropractor, and I had a lot of upper back pain. I have some scoliosis in my upper and lower back, and I had numbness down my right arm from using a mouse, and all of the different things that we were doing, you know, trying to do headstand and shoulder stand on top of all of that was really challenging. So I did a lot, learned a lot about adapting those more difficult poses to my injurious body at that time, and that was very interesting. It's first I see it a lot in other students that I'm teaching now that are in teacher training programs, where they're really frustrated with themselves if they have an injury. But I think that the injuries actually teach us more about our own bodies and our own inclinations, and also can help us teach our students and help our students when they become injured and still want to have a full yoga practice.
Hmm. And not to create any slight of the wonderful teachers that you've had, and along the way past that from your early training, how attuned has the yoga community been, let's say, from 2005 era to the
Hmm.
2015 era and beyond?
To injuries,
Yeah.
I think it's getting better as yoga therapy becomes more of a known offering. I think that it's shifting. Even back then, because I started my training in 2004 and through 2005, and there was a lot of emphasis placed on safety and alignment, especially because it was a hatha based training. So there was, you know, alignment was first and foremost in safety. Um, but I think in public classes, there was a lot more push, basically, to keep going more and further and get those harder poses and be able to do the more challenging physical practices. And as we are, you know, approaching now more than 10 years later, I still see a lot of classes where it's how many poses can you do in an hour type style. And whereas most people, especially people that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and if they have had any kind of injury, they need a little bit slower, a moment to kind of feel themselves in each posture and not rush through it and rush through the transitions. So I think that as yoga therapy is becoming more known, that this slower pace and more therapeutic practice is becoming more accepted.
Hmm. Well, you've mentioned yoga therapy,
Hmm.
and in some circles these days, it's a hot button. And
Yeah,
what
it is.
is called yoga therapy? Who can practice yoga therapy? And and in other professions too, there are certain catchwords. But for here, it sounds as if you've gotten exposure as a yoga therapist in your training.
Hmm.
And can you explain some of the distinction of transitioning from one level of training, let's say a 200 hour with excellent lineage, to 500 or however many hundreds beyond that as a yoga therapist?
So, in a lot of ways, the 200-hour level of yoga teacher training is to introduce the basics. You know, these are the forms of the postures. This is what pranayama is. Hopefully, this is what the 8 limbs of yoga are. A little bit about some other philosophy, some subtle anatomy like chakras and vayus and things like that. And it's to prepare people to teach. But again, at a very basic level. Beyond that, the 300-hour, the 500-hour, and the 800-hour yoga therapy programs, and I ended up going to the Integrative Yoga Therapy School at Kripalu, and also spent some time at Mount Madonna in California with Joseph and Lillian LePage. Their focus is to train yoga teachers how to take groups or individuals with a specific ailment and create a yoga protocol to help them deal with that ailment, whatever it happens to be. So our training focused on the systems of the body and the most common ailments in each system of the body. And then most of us ended up specializing in something. And I ended up specializing in yoga for cancer. And more now in North Carolina, yoga for seniors. But the difference really is, you know, I think in a lot of ways, yoga isn't seen as an exercise necessarily or just a physical discipline. There are a host of other more contemplative, quieter practices that yoga therapy employs, including some of the things that you mentioned before, things like chanting, mudra, yoga nidra, more pranayama and breath work, doing body scans and guided visualizations, and basically all of these different tools in the toolbox to enable the practitioner to connect with themselves in a much deeper way that isn't just can they do a downward dog or a triangle pose.
And that brings us to the idea of what is accessible and how the most elemental parts of yoga, not necessarily a whole limb, but branches within that limb can be intrinsically therapeutic. So let's move towards our first pearl from Cheryl and catch her at a different angle, sharing a perspective for your practice now or later.
Go ahead and close your eyes. Bring your awareness into your whole body. And take just a moment to scan through the different parts of your body to notice if there's any place of discomfort or pain, or illness or injury. Start to visualize that those parts of your body are glowing with a red light. Imagine that as you inhale, that glow gets even brighter, drawing the inhalations into the areas of discomfort and pain. And just do that for a few rounds. If there's more than one area, start with one and then we can move on to the next. And then on the exhalations, imagine that that red glowing light that represents the pain is starting to dissipate and move out of the body on the exhalation. Inhale into the painful area. Imagine the red glowing light, and exhale the pain from the body. Imagine that it is leaving on the breath. And if you've got another area that needs some attention, take a few breaths there. Inhale into it. Exhale, imagine the pain being released from the body.
So viewers and listeners, were you able to experience that sensation of focusing and visualization in some form of color or temperature? We'd love to hear from you and to get your experiences or questions about this further. And we'll ask Cheryl as to how she became involved with this sense of color and imagery.
That snippet came from a yoga nidra practice that I had written for students of mine that had cancer. And through the Yoga Nidra process, there is a moment of both breath visualization where we talk about the breath and also of kind of guided imagery. And I kind of combine those two things as in an experience to help people who might be dealing with a part of their body that they may have disconnected from because of cancer. And to actually use the breath and use this image of light in terms of discomfort, to see if they could connect with it in a little bit better way. And that meditation goes on to replacing the sensation of pain with one of comfort. So there's actually a process that they can go through in that moment.
And these are just a bit of a concept that Cheryl shares more fully with her students, but also Cheryl has a very rich website that has elements on it where you can learn more. Can you tell us, Cheryl, about some of this training that you've had in yoga for cancer,
Mhm.
as well as how people can learn more on your website?
Yeah, so the website comes from my previous life as a software person. I have been designing websites for many years longer than I've been a yoga practitioner. And I started creating that website when I was in my yoga teacher training, original teacher training back in 2004. And I am of the firm belief that all of these practices that we all learn are common, they should be common knowledge. I mean, you obviously need to learn them from someone, but I think that it should be available to people. So I created the site to share little snippets about postures. There's pages of asana instruction with photos and descriptions. There's pages of mudra and pranayama instruction as well. There are a host of cancer-specific resources on the site. There are restorative practices that you can download and use, like a little handout, as well as little videos that you can watch on YouTube, full classes as well as snippets of practices. And these were to help my students who were going through treatment, who couldn't get to class, kind of keep up with what we were doing in class. So for 5 years, I even wrote a blog that followed the class sequence. And those can be, downloaded and taken a look at and practiced at home. So that kind of blended my love of yoga and my love of creating a good website.
The never-ending story.
It is.
That is, because it's an endeavor.
It is.
I looked at it. There's also on there a sense of a subscription or a signing on. Could you
Yeah.
share the name of the site, because I know they're dying to, or
It's
no bad pun intended.
it's yogacheryl.com, and it's just CHERYL is how you spell Cheryl. And there are the parts of the site that are sort of my schedule and the workshop schedule and all of that are kind of out and available. If you want to look at the actual practices pages, there's a free log on. You just create a log on and a password, and that gives me your address so that you're on the mailing list. So it's a small fee of a mailing mailing address ad, and I only send out newsletters about every month or so. And it's just to announce the various classes, like at Bliss Body and at Blue Lotus that I teach here in town, and then the trainings that I do nationwide.
Hmm. Well, you've cited trainings that you do. Let's roll back a little bit. How did your interest further develop once you decided to learn about teaching yoga for cancer survivors?
So that came about after probably my first hit of the yoga therapy training in 2007. The school that I was teaching at now, my alma mater, Piedmont Yoga, contacted me because they had been contacted by an organization called Yoga Bear, and it's a nonprofit in San Francisco area that connects yoga classes with people with cancer. And the classes and the teachers provide classes for free for cancer patients. So it's kind of a placement program. And they contacted me and asked if I would be interested in actually teaching a class just for cancer patients. So there is a nonprofit that I worked with and continue to work with called Piedmont Yoga Community, and they offer classes for people with physical disabilities as well as developmental disabilities, and my program for people with cancer. And we started in about 3 studios in Berkeley and Oakland area for cancer patients. And this was a very interesting time of learning how to make something like that happen, make one of these programs happen. As it turns out, having classes in yoga studios is probably not the perfect scenario because if someone is in treatment, they are running around going to doctor's appointments, often very tired, and to have yet another place to go and another appointment to keep oftentimes prevented them from coming. And what we found it was that there was a pretty much a 6-month span of popularity in each one of those settings, in each one of those 3 studios that we tried it in. And that was about the treatment cycle. So people were able to come to classes in the afternoon during the weekday while they weren't working, but then they either got better and went back to work or they didn't get better. And in either case, they couldn't continue to come to classes. So we learned from that experience, and after a brief hiatus, started to work with the cancer support community in Walnut Creek. And then that is actually a physical location where they already are getting support group. They're getting all kinds of other types of mind-body classes, cooking, basically anything that a cancer patient might need. They have those types of informative classes there. And they already had a really wonderful yoga program, and they hired me to come in and to teach a few more classes at that space.
Mm. What a brilliant opportunity when you have a dedicated space.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
And who was the entity behind, or what was the entity behind that space? Was that
It's a nonprofit as well. So the cancer support communities are nationwide. The one that I was with was in Walnut Creek, and I believe there's another one that's actually in the Northern California area now as well. And the Piedmont Yoga Community, the nonprofit that I was involved in, also kind of helped organize and helped to fund part of the work that I did there.
Wow. Do you know if these entities are still in operation?
They are still in operation.
All right, so we can learn from them. Is there anything comparable to the Walnut Creek enterprise in North Carolina?
Not in this central area of North Carolina that I know of. I know that Cornucopia House is here, and they have, I believe, support groups, but I'm not sure that they have as much of a mind-body movement program as that they used to have.
Wow. So that in itself creates almost a desert of service.
Yeah, it does.
For cancer.
There are some classes that are taught at UNC for patients by a wonderful woman named Doreen. And there are classes there are short 4-week sessions at Duke Raleigh where they have like a transitions group for patients that they can come in and talk about various, the doctors can come in and talk to them, and they have some mind-body, but there's not a dedicated Yoga for Cancer program in this area.
What about Meetup or something like that? Are there social networks out there possibly? I'm guessing.
There probably are, but I don't know of them at this time.
Well, we have viewers and listeners, thousands checking in. What if you had an idea, or while we're on the show, why don't you check and let us know? We welcome your call at 919. Oh, I get to lean back again. 518-9773. Cheryl's got the queen of the studio speaker microphone in front of her. We also are on Computers 2K Voice on Skype, and you can log in on the chat box where you are on Nissan Communications. So while your hands are busy, we're going to take a little transition here and explore a little bit about a mudra with Cheryl's second pearl.
This mudra is called Vajra Pradama, or the mudra of unshakable trust and confidence in the self. And it's very helpful for moments when you're feeling self-doubt or worry. So if you take your hands and clasp them with the fingers to the outside, open the palm toward the body, creating a loose netting with the fingers and a W shape at the top of the index fingers and thumbs, and hold that in front of the chest a few inches and close the eyes. And as you breathe in through the nose, feel that the breath is drawn lightly up towards the top of the chest and collarbones, gently opening the heart, releasing any feelings of doubt, worry, and exhaling again through the nose. And it's best to hold these gestures for maybe a minute or so when you're learning them and noticing how they affect you over time. They can be used during moments of need or during meditation. This one's actually even helpful to do right before you go to bed to help you sleep.
So as I attempt to rest my fingers in this open-hearted area, I even can feel the tightness in my hands.
Mm.
And it's an interesting offering, yet it seems physically challenging. How could we adapt this pose so that if someone has limited mobility,
Mm-hmm.
to foster some of the essences of this mudra? What are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
mudras are really great because there are several that you can offer that have a similar effect. Um, so if you're trying to create an open heart sensation, even something as simple, so that one was clasping and holding in front of the body. You can do something like this. This is called Padma, which is more also an open heart gesture. You can even do something as simple as just holding the palms up, kind of at the level of the chest, or even just resting the hands across the heart. So there's a bunch of different ones that have a similar kind of vein to them. But if one is not comfortable for someone for whatever reason, or it may just not resonate energetically with their system, there's always another one that can be offered.
And with hand mudras, is it reasonable also to consider a blanket or a pillow under the arms to create other senses of grounding and support?
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea, especially those larger yoga blocks are like the perfect height that you could put your elbow on, or a bolster sitting across the lap, or a pillow. Most of them are typically done seated, but there are some that are actually comfortable to do when you're reclining. So sometimes the mudras, the hands are going to be resting on the legs or even on the floor if you're lying down. So there's usually a way that you can support the arms if that's necessary.
I have a intention when I go to sleep at night, which is a physical intention, but it involves relaxation.
Hmm.
And I am essentially attempting to lay on my side with good neck support, and that I'm laying on my side and I attempt to have my hand open like this
Hmm.
and to just rest the
Hmm.
other one on top of that. It's my fantasy that I could sleep openly as opposed to
Curling up.
fetally,
Hmm.
since I already have issues with my neck that I've already attended to and hoping to
Hmm.
minimize that. And I find that this also can relax my neck and shoulders.
Mm.
So if we're doing hand mudras, how do we keep an awareness of fostering relaxation as opposed to contraction? What little tips can we go a little deeper with? Do you like?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, when the body starts to react to underlying stressors, which is usually what causes that tension in the body when we're trying to rest, either you're physically uncomfortable and something is hurting, and the body is reacting in a tight way to try to protect a joint, or there's some emotional or mental stress that's underlying that's creating this physical compression. I think one of the best things to do is first to notice that it's happening, which is probably the hardest thing to do because we're so used to our own levels of stress that it's difficult to take a moment and go, wow, I feel my body's constricting right now. But once you do notice it, if you can just try to breathe, I think the breath is an amazing vehicle to try to release whatever it is that is creating that sense of tightness. And there's a couple of different techniques. You can try to breathe into the part of the body that feels uncomfortable, like in the first pearl. You can try to breathe out, just physically exhaling whatever it is that's creating the stress. Um, and if you're finding it that's a position of the body that isn't feeling very good, then obviously trying to change position. Even when we do yoga nidra, oftentimes people, and they're in shavasana and yoga nidra with lots and lots of support. But if you're uncomfortable and you're trying to meditate, it's not going to work. So you can always roll over or sit up or change the physical position in some way, add more support, so that you can try to release a little bit more. But noticing it is really the first step to
Mm-hmm.
making a shift.
So, viewers and listeners, we started out with a body scan where Cheryl was inviting you to explore areas of your body. And then we went into the hand mudra, which I consider the tail that wags the dog. And I invite you to notice, where is your tail and how is it affecting your dog? Because so often we could be in a closed, forward angled position, which can affect our breathing. And that has a cascading effect of less function and less comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're scanning, can you just envision where your hands are? Can you find a posturing that is relaxing and open? And notice how it feels and let us know. Cheryl's trying to invite your experience to go beyond just pain, but also your awareness of meditation. Cheryl, tell us a little bit more about your iRest and Yoga Nidra training.
So my yoga nidra training came from my IYT experience. We used it as an afternoon, after lunch treat during the training, and those trainings were very intense. They were residential. We would be up at 7 a.m. meditating and have class until 9 p.m. at night. And it was classroom time. It wasn't all just practicing yoga time. So after lunch, we needed a little bit of a brain boost to prepare ourselves for the afternoon lectures. And the very first time that I experienced it, I had never even heard of yoga nidra before. And I literally, when it was maybe 30 minutes, and it's a guided relaxation practice that takes you through different levels of awareness, body awareness, breath awareness, awareness of pairs of opposites, and lists of items that you can visualize. When I came back out of it, I had felt like I had sat down a piece of luggage filled with all of my gunk, my mental and emotional and physical gunk. And I could actually look at it and go, I don't actually have to pick all that stuff back up again. I felt literally lighter. And it's a practice that I immediately started to attempt to teach back then. I've gotten better at it now. But it has such an amazing ability to allow people who don't sit and meditate silently by themselves to really drop into that place of witnessing. And I think that ability to drop into the witness is one of the most important pieces of these more contemplative, some would say deeper practices of yoga, and including, seated meditation, yoga nidra, all of those sorts of classifications of postures or of practices.
Mm-hmm. And who were your teachers?
I studied with Joseph and Lillian LePage, taught us the technique, and we learned from the original little blue book from the Bihar school, and the original text. And the technique was developed in about the 1950s. So it's, we sometimes think of all these practices as being thousands and thousands of years old. The concepts are definitely that old, but I think some of the practices are a lot more modern than that.
Can appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
There's different perspectives in our cultures as to understand what's going on. I operated, and probably still do, in a sense of fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And meditation is not easy for me to complete in a prolonged period of time without falling asleep.
Yeah.
Yoga Nidra borders on sleep, but some of us are more like a light switch that goes on and off, as opposed to one that can be dimmed and filtered. So this is something, viewers and listeners, that you can come to yogacheryl.com and learn more about Yoga Nidra, a very accessible practice. Cheryl has shared that at Yoga Fest.
There's actually a free meditation if you join the mailing list. On most of the pages will pop up a thing to join the mailing list. You'll get a free 20-minute Yoga Nidra meditation that you can listen to.
Yes, even if it takes more than one listening.
Because you might fall asleep, and that's okay. I always tell my students, if you fall asleep, think about how many times. I looked it up at one point. I think it's like, for a middle-aged person, it's like 30 or 40,000 times that we've fallen asleep in our lifetime. Maybe that's wrong, but it's a big number. I can't remember. And you're asking yourself to not fall asleep, which is really hard. You're trying to skirt the boundary between being awake and being asleep. And like Howie said, most of the time you just go from here straight down into the sleep. And you're still hearing it at some level, but it takes a few times. It's a practice, right? That's why they call it a practice. We have to practice it.
Just hearing about it after lunch seems like the express lane to REM.
Yes.
When I've practiced Yoga Nidra on some very nicely structured environments, I do use props to sit up, or lean up, I should say. And the other thing that I haven't tried fully, but men especially, you can put little cosmetic tape over your lips to keep you from snoring as loudly, which disrupts the whole room. So that's my pearl. Sit up and bring some tape.
Never seen the tape trick?
Well, you hadn't heard me snore either. They didn't have any duct tape. Cheryl has also partnered with one of our partners, Bliss Body Yoga. Bliss Body Yoga has been supportive of our programs, and we're actually starting an adaptive chair yoga program next month there. It'll be a pilot that one of our partners, Susan Kilman, will be teaching. So we'll check Bliss Body as well as the You Call This Yoga schedules. We also, coming up this Saturday, have a day of donation yoga at Bliss Body, where I know I've been involved in collecting over 50 raffles, which you can buy online, 5 for 21 and 15 for 52. Why? Because they charge fees on the line. Or you could plan to come to the day where we have 4 different classes and a free party afterwards. So Colby, a good friend and owner of the studio, has prepared a little sponsor spot where she can enlighten you about Bliss Body Yoga. Tell us, Colby.
Hi yogis, this is Colby with Bliss Body Yoga. We are getting ready to celebrate our 4th anniversary this Saturday, August 12th. We will have donation classes throughout the day to benefit You Call This Yoga, and a party in the early evening. There will be raffle prizes, great food from Niamond, a henna tattoo artist, and just fun community time. And in honor of 4 years of Bliss, I'm going to share 4 fun facts about the studio. So the first is that the studio, before it became Bliss Body, was a maternity clothing store. So as a result, we have these lovely shelves that now hold our props that I assume held maternity clothing before we moved in. We also have a really nice dressing room in the back here, and lots of lighting options. So all of these things kind of make Bliss the beautiful space that it is. The second fun fact is that since we've opened, this plant over here has survived. It actually moved with me to Raleigh, and this is just pretty amazing because I do not have a green thumb. Our third fun fact is that the very first class that we held at Bliss Body was a flow yoga class taught by Autumn Belk, and in attendance at that class were both Mary and Abby, who now teach at the studio, and all 3 of those teachers, along with many others, have been with us since the beginning. And then our final fact is that since we opened 4 years ago, we've roughly held about 6,240 yoga classes. So that's a whole lot of Shavasana in the past 4 years. Anyways, we hope to see you this Saturday, August 12th, to celebrate 4 years of bliss.
In this experience on Saturday, we have Jen Bluestone doing a family class. We have Megan Flaherty doing an active flow class. In the afternoon, we have Mary Scadella, the very same Mary, who is teaching a gentle flow. Barbara Vosk will be teaching a restorative class. And then the party at 4:30. We'll be selling raffles for each class, and you can learn more at the youcallthisyoga.org website, as well as the blissbody.com website. But coming back to Cheryl, who is sharing some other deeper practices that she has been exploring, I've had a conversation with Cheryl about trying to bring yoga for cancer to the Triangle area. But there's a challenge, and it's an interesting thing about having experience and training and the relationships in another state and coming to a different location with the same amount of passion and yet finding roadblocks. So Cheryl, how can the community come together to help move things forward? I know money is always helpful, but we've talked about location and recruitment and marketing and even doctor education. How can we help cancer survivors in the Triangle area? And viewers and listeners, please chime in with any thoughts. We welcome that.
Yeah, I think the last thing that you mentioned is probably one of the most important, at least from the doctor-patient relationship standpoint. I often get private clients that come to me that will tell me, and some of them are cancer survivors, and some of them don't have cancer. But they'll say, my doctor told me to do yoga, and they showed me this app on my phone, or they said, oh yeah, any yoga is fine, whatever. And I cringe a little bit thinking, oh my, knowing what I know about that particular client and what they have going on, I would hate for them to go to even a beginning level vinyasa class because it would be very difficult for them. So I think that the doctors, it would be good if they understood what yoga therapy was, and that's one of the biggest sort of outreach efforts that the International Association of Yoga Therapy is trying to do, is to create a better understanding in the medical community as to what yoga therapy is, that we have a credential, not a licensure yet. We're probably moving in that direction, although that is a hotly argued topic, whether we want to do that or not. And to allow the physicians to be able to recommend the type of yoga, or you need to find a yoga therapist or a gentle class or a yoga for seniors class or a yoga for cancer class, so that they really understand. And unless the physician has had personal experience with yoga, they usually don't get it very well. They think yoga's great, but the type of yoga matters. In terms of the community, I really do think that the classes need to be where the patients already are. So if that means that the hospitals or the treatment facilities have space dedicated, or even a conference room somewhere. I've been to classes in basements and conference rooms, pretty much anywhere you can have them. I've seen them being held there, but some place where there's space. Students oftentimes have to bring their own props. That's also an issue. They don't want to have the onus of cleaning the props or storing the props. But providing the service so that the patients don't have to go out of their way to get to it is really key.
I can appreciate the challenge. I've sought for years to have yoga for multiple sclerosis and other neuromuscular disorders in a facility that from a very large practice in town, but their exam rooms are tiny. They don't have group rooms per se for education, and mostly it's rehabilitative services. So just having dedicated space, even for an hour a week, seems like a tremendous anomaly.
Yeah.
Where patients congregate, even if there could be hundreds in a day, to get a 10 by 10 room is an adventure.
It is, and in a lot of cases, chair yoga becomes the thing that's done because there probably is a room with chairs in it, And that means that the patients don't have to change clothes. They don't even have to take their shoes off. They can just come in, sit down, and have a chair yoga session. And there's an amazing amount of practice that can be done sitting in a chair. I actually teach right now at the Forest at Duke, and we have 2 chair classes and 2 mat classes a week. And I continually am surprised by the feedback that I get of how much they feel like they did something from the chair. So it's an amazing addition.
Oh yes, it's the real deal too.
Yeah, it is.
I
It's
mean,
not fake yoga, it's real yoga.
because what percent of your life are you spending on a mat?
Yeah, and how much do we sit? And the one of the favorite things that I like to share with people about chair yoga is that you once you know a few things, if you're sitting at your desk or you're sitting on your sofa and you think you need to move around, then just do a little bit of chair yoga. You don't have to have a whole hour of chair yoga for it to be effective. A few minutes is actually really wonderful.
Yes. In fact, now I could put in a plug for next week's
That's
show. Boldly going where no show will ever go till the week after. We have a special guest next week. Because of a scheduling shift, we searched high and low for a chair yoga aficionado. It's me. We searched high and low for another wonderful substitute host, and we have Celia again. So we're doing our own version of Pinky in the Brain, sharing our experiences in yoga as people with disabilities, also developing the organization, and pearls of wisdom that we've pulled out of the ocean. My little element here is to encourage you to try to sit in some form with palms up, trying to see what's level here, as opposed to palms down as we spend an inordinate amount of time. So if you can consider that, and then we'll explore. This is a receiving, this is a closed and grounded, already closed and grounded. So as you consider that, we can also consider what Cheryl's next pearl will be, which is a practice. And this is something you can come back to on the video, or if you're in a safe position now, consider how you can position an upright, seated, comfortable spot with your palms up. Thank you, Cheryl.
Chanting a simple sound is a really wonderful way to create a sense of centering and can be done before seated meditation, as a standalone practice, or even before Shavasana. So we're just going to chant the sound Ah. Try to stay relaxed, breathing into the belly between sounds. Take a deep breath in. Ah. And feel the resonance of the sound throughout the torso. And then open the eyes.
Well, prior to this week, I had never seen or heard that instrument. And I'm going to ask Cheryl to describe that, and also not only the sound of ah and relationship to the body and chakras and other channels, but other sounds that we might consider and how we can learn more about them.
So the instrument is called a tanpura, and that's a different form of tanpura. That's called a travel tanpura, and it barely fits in the back of my very small car. But traditionally, they look a little bit more like a sitar. It's a gourd with a very long, thin neck. So this one's more for travel purposes. And it creates that really very Eastern sounding buzzing with the strings. And that buzzing is called the Anuswara. And when you chant with an instrument, and in classes I typically use something called a shruti box, which is kind of the back part of a harmonium, just the accordion part. And it also creates that sense of the Anuswara, the buzzing. So when you're chanting with it, you want to allow your voice to meld into that buzzing sound so that you can feel the vibration that your voice creates in your body. And the ah vowel typically vibrates in the center of the chest, so around the heart chakra. And you're also going to notice it in your throat and in your sinuses and in your mouth, usually when you make any kind of vocalization. But chanting is one of the quickest ways that you can shift your focus to something more internal and more calm and centered. And I tend to use it either typically in the beginning of a class or before Shavasana, when I teach my public classes, to help prepare the mind to actually go into Shavasana. Because sometimes the body is really willing to go into Shavasana, but the mind just wants to wander. So the sound practices, chanting bija mantras, chanting Om, chanting these vowel sounds will help to focus the mind.
Hmm. And could you touch base on the other vowels and where they may connect to the body?
So yeah, I studied with a woman named Ann Dyer in Oakland, and she, this is we had a thing called the Vok Choir, and this is a warm-up exercise that she gave us that is a warm-up typical to Indian classical singing techniques. And it starts at the heart, and there's an ah sound at the heart, and then you kind of spiral out from the heart. So you go up from the sort of the bottom of the sternum to the top of the sternum, which is an A, to the belly, which is an O, to the forehead, which is an E, to the pelvis, which is an oo sound, and then all the way up to the crown, which is the humming sound, or that's more almost like a bee humming sound, and then usually stop again back at the heart. So you can kind of go all the way around with all those different vowels. And I have YouTube videos that describe that technique.
Great. Could you go through the vowel sequence again?
So it's ah at the heart, A at the throat, O in the belly, there's an E in the head, an oo sound all the way down in the pelvis and legs, and then a humming sound, in the crown. And then you usually finish again with ah at the heart.
And are these videos on your website?
They're on the YouTube channel. Yeah, you can find them on the website. The website where the videos are listed, the top of the page has full-length classes, and the bottom of the page has little snippets of practices, and it's on the little snippet area. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to course back a little to practices for folks with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
For women, what were the most frequent types of cancer that you have seen, and how about for men too?
Well, for women, it's breast cancer above and beyond most other forms. I did do some research in 2014, and we had a very small pilot group of people. I think there were 17, and 35% of the women had breast cancer. For men, it is a combination, if I remember correctly, of, well, the most that I have seen, honestly, there's so few men come to yoga classes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see quite as many, but there were more cases of prostate cancer and lung cancer and cancer of the brain, and then blood cancers, so things like lymphoma, multiple myeloma in men.
Mm.
Now, that's not a nationwide average. That's just what I saw in my classes at the cancer support community.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it speaks that there's a broad swath of cancers that men could be dealing with,
Yes.
but they're already suffering another form of loss of identity
Right.
as they age,
Mm-hmm.
because men tend to be less communal than women,
Mm-hmm.
unless they have their special interest groups.
Right.
Can appreciate that, as yoga is a very female-laden
It is.
arena, but they're very giving too.
I must say, though, I have noticed that there are more men in my classes in North Carolina than there were in California. I don't know what that's about. There's a lot more male teachers in Northern California, though. So I think that the male students gravitated towards the male teachers. But here I do see more men in class, which always makes me very happy that they are stepping out and into that environment that is very female and feeling comfortable enough to come to classes.
Hmm. Yes, you can come to my class and you'll get even more special treatment.
That's right.
We'll give you the treatment. Also, in terms of ladies and their negotiations where there's often a surgery involved,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also lymphatic drainage issues.
Mm-hmm.
So as a yoga therapist, you can facilitate, but it also takes a special awareness about drainage and dynamics of movement.
Yeah, it does.
How does yoga for cancer work to modify poses, especially for lymph issues?
So in the physical part of the practices, that is really what we're trying to do, is move the inguinal parts of the body. So your inguinal parts are the areas around your armpits and your groins, and then throughout the core of the body there are lymph nodes. And your lymphatic system needs muscular pumping or physical movement in order to move the lymph. So it's similar to the cardiovascular system in that there are these vessels, but there isn't a pump except for your muscles. So being sedentary is one of the worst things that you can do for your lymphatic system. So throughout the classes and the trainings that I do for yoga and cancer, that we focus on most of the movements in yoga are safe as long as they're done in a way that is not overheating. So you wouldn't want to do a really vigorous vinyasa practice when you are a cancer patient. And there are some arguments on that as well. One school of thought thinks that vigorous yoga is fine for cancer patients. I am of the other camp. I feel like if you want a vigorous workout, you can go to the gym, you can go walking or running. Yoga is for something entirely different. But the movements are all to try to get this idea of squeezing and releasing, so that there is pressure placed on those inguinal parts of the body, and then there is a sense of relaxation or letting go, so that the lymph can flow a little bit more readily. And then there's also things that we have to take into consideration when there has been surgery, whether it is from a mastectomy or some other form of surgery. Just making sure that the person is comfortable, that there's no pressure being placed on the area of surgery. But there are many more poses that are safe than are unsafe for a cancer patient. And I think that the teachers that I train in my training are very happy to hear that, because they get a little freaked out when a cancer patient shows up in their class and they have no idea what to do and they want to put them in Shavasana. But there's a lot that can be done with someone that is in active treatment to help them kind of feel better and really to help reduce some of the side effects from chemo and radiation.
Yes, there is so much more to touch on. Viewers and listeners, you can reach Cheryl at yogacheryl.com. But Cheryl is also very active in the community. Cheryl, what's coming up in the near future or far future that you'd like to share?
So I teach public classes at Blue Point Yoga on their Irwin Road studio, and Tuesdays and Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock I teach the Yoga for Over 50, which is a wonderful group of people. And then I teach at Bliss Body once a quarter. I do a Reiki, aromatherapy, and restorative yoga class on a Saturday afternoon. And then once a month on a Friday evening, I do a yoga nidra for one of the chakras. And it's a little bit of movement, a little bit of sound, creating an intention, and then the yoga nidra practice. And then in October, I will be teaching for Blue Point a 50-hour yoga for cancer teacher training that is going to be split up into 3 weekend modules, so about 3-4 months apart. And you can look at either Blue Point's website or my website to find out more about that. I'll likely go back to California in March to teach part 2 of my Yoga for Cancer training at the Cancer Support Community. And I might be crazy, but I'm thinking I'm going to offer a 200-hour yoga teacher training through Integrative Yoga Therapy as an affiliate in Bahama, which is north of Durham. So that is the thing that's percolating, that I really want to do it, but it's one of those things. It's a huge undertaking as a single person to do that. So hopefully I will have another teacher helping me out. So
Well, you have
be
a
on the
vision,
lookout.
a
I
vision
do, I
and an
do.
intention. You've gone public.
Right?
Viewers and listeners, Cheryl's got it. You want to join her team?
Sign up.
Be part of the path, because
right.
she's boldly going in Bahama
am.
where no one has gone before.
That is very, very true.
In fact, very few go to Bahama. If you knew Bahama like she did,
If you want to ride a horse, come to Bahama. That's what most people go to Bahama for.
where they're behaving badly.
That's
Yes.
right.
Well, speaking of behaving badly, please tune in next week also, where we will have a special guest host, Celia Hartnett, interviewing our mystery guest. And we'll be sharing about accessible yoga in the Triangle area, the mission of You Call This Yoga, some of the interesting things that we're doing and have done recently, more than just this show. In fact, a lot of our board doesn't know all what we're doing. It's just a wonderful endeavor. So we're boldly going, but today we're going to be humbly saying thank you to Cheryl Fenner Brown. You can view the show on the Nissan channel on the archives and visit us and let us know how you feel about the show. We welcome your feedback before, during, and after. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
It's fun playing with you.
Yes, it
Let's
was
give us
lovely.
our Donna Summer look goodbye. Talking about the bad girl.
Thanks, Howie.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And bye for now.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.